All right, hey everybody, this is Professor Diffley. This is History 103, Module 2, Chapter 1. This is Lecture Video 2. So we left off in the last video talking about radiocarbon dating. Let's talk about some more cool overview terms here, and let's talk about culture. Culture is a way of life of a group of people. Their behaviors, beliefs, values, and symbols that they accept and are passed along by communication and imitation from one generation to another. So again, a very important part here is that it is something that is passed along by communication and imitation. Culture is not inborn, right? You are not born with the culture, whatever culture you are now. You're American, wherever you're, and that's a very varied cultures, obviously. Wherever you're from, whatever your culture is, that is something you will learn, right? Think about how you learned your practices, things like that. It was taught you. That's what culture is. It's understood, again, by the totality of their learned experience, accumulated experience, socially transmitted and shared, belonging to that cultural group, right? So that's what makes a culture. A culture is everybody has same traditions, beliefs, and again, how do they have it? Well, it's all been taught and learned. And again, symbolic communication, right? So things can mean different things in different cultures. It really can. One example, right? So just holding up your fingers, your middle and your index finger for the number 2, right? To say, I want 2 or something, or what would some, say the peace sign. Well, that's what it means here in the U.S. You go to a place like Australia, which again, not that different of a culture, right? Both started from England, that sort of thing. Both speak English. Don't do that to people in Australia right now. That's the equivalent of giving someone the middle finger. Don't do that. But that's how things can change, right? To us, that is a harmless thing. They say, how you doing? You say, or how many beers you want? How many of this you want? You say, you hold up your fingers. The bartender or some of the clerk thinks you're, flipping them off. So that is what it can be, symbolic. And again, they're learned and perpetuated in a society through its institutions. What do we mean by its institutions? Family, religion, that sort of thing. So that's what culture is. And culture is different, can be different, and it changes over time. And again, so think of today. We look up, think of symbols of the U.S. I show you a bald eagle. Bald eagle. For someone, in American culture, that bald eagle represents the United States, right? It could represent freedom, all sorts of things like that, right? Because that's what we've been taught. That's what we've seen. You show someone else that same picture of that bird, and you say it's a bird, right? Why? Because they don't have the same background. They haven't been taught the same way. And you'll find this around the world. What you have... Example, another one using the Aborigines of Australia and the British and the Australians that came there. The British that came there, and then people who are Australians. In the southern sky, you have something called the Southern Cross. It is it's 4 stars that, if drawn together, it can make a cross. Almost looks like a kite in many ways. Well, it wasn't called the Southern Cross until the British and Europeans came there. Why? Well, a cross is a symbol of Christianity. So when they looked up, they saw a religious symbol. Now, the Aborigines, the natives of Australia, saw something different. And they also saw something different based on where they were in, on the continent. Those on the shore, the Aborigines who lived on the coast, when they looked up and they saw that what could be looked almost as a diamond shape in many ways, they saw a ray, right? Like in the ocean, a ray like that, a stingray. Why? Because that's what they were common to seeing. Others, when you went further inland into the outback and other places where they didn't have the ocean around, when they looked up and saw that, they saw, they didn't connect it. They created, 2 different, they connected 2 different ways, almost like a J and an L with the J and the L lines at the bottom almost slanted upwards. Why? Because to them, that looks like a kangaroo track. Because why? Because kangaroos do leave a track like that. Now, again, someone else sees that's not Christian or Aborigine. They look up there, they're going to see something else. Why? Because it's symbolic and it means something to them. And so that is what culture can be. So culture does impact how we view the world, how we interact with it, and what we make of the symbols out there. So again, culture can be learned, right? Culture is a learned thing. You can adopt another culture and become like that. It's not something you are just inbred. Again, it's born with, not inbred, born with, right? You weren't born and you knew all the, every symbol, every holiday, all the practices. That is something that's taught. So moving on, another term out there, society. So what is society? Simply, it's a group of interacting organisms. Anything. Ants have societies. Bees have societies. all sorts of animals do. They're just interacting together. Now, in humans, though, we talk about a group of people interacting either directly or indirectly with each other, right? We're all part of American society, even though we all don't directly interact with each other. How? Through the way we work, right? Through jobs we do. You might work in a factory or on a farm, someone might, and they're producing something. The person who buys that uses it, in their daily life. They're never going to interact directly, but they have indirectly, that sort of thing. Now, the thing in humans, though, is we also make distinctions between societies, right? It is usually this idea of societies are different, right? Technically, you could call anybody from Canada, the United States, or Mexico an American. Heck, you can call anybody on the North and South American continents American. Why? Because they live in the Americas. However, when I say American, what comes to mind? Do you think of a Brazilian? Do you think of a Canadian? Do you think of it, right? You think of someone from the United States, right? Why? Because we view our society as different. Now, what makes societies different? It often is culture. It's often other things. They're borders, and that's stuff we'll get into later. But societies can be different. So right now, right, there's one human civilization out there, where we all live. But there are all these different societies, and often today societies are grouped by countries, but not always. Societies can be people subgroupings, right? Of people within a larger society, people into the same thing, same music, same interests, that sort of thing. Those could be different societies. A subculture, sometimes we say it, or a sub-society, that sort of thing. So other key terms that will come up: polytheism versus monotheism. Now, this is about religion, right? Theism. That's the base word. Poly meaning multi, mono meaning one. So what is polytheism? Polytheism is the belief and worship of multiple gods, right? And that's really important. So what you could have is one religion where there are multiple gods. Think of the ancient Romans, the ancient Greeks, others like that, where they had a pantheon of gods, right? All these gods doing different things. In reality, polytheism has dominated in human existence. Monotheism is pretty new in the grand scheme of things. And even then, it took a long time to catch on. Like for Christianity to spread through Europe, around and take over Europe through the Roman Empire. We're talking about in some places as late as the 1400s where they accepted monotheism. Why? Polytheism made sense to many of the ancient peoples. What? They viewed each god as having a role, right? So every natural thing that happens, there's a god of thunder, there's a god of fire, there's a god of water, there's a god of sky, sun god, moon god, every possible thing. To them, the idea of one God who controls everything and is creator of everything seemed nuts, right? Now, the way many of us look back, how could you have so many gods, right? Because why? Because most people, the big three, why I say most people, the big three religions on the planet, even Hinduism, it depends on who you ask. We'll talk about this later in course. Some say it's monotheistic, where the different deities really just represent their attributes of the same God. But again, we'll get into that later. But the belief that one God can control everything was impossible for the ancients to understand. Just like in some ways it's hard for us to understand their view of things. But polytheism, belief in and worship in multiple gods. Monotheism is the belief and worship of only one God, right? The examples, the big three religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, right? There is one God that created everything, that created the world, the universe, that sort of thing. That's the difference. So make sure, and when we're talking about these two, we're talking about how many gods are within their religious belief system. That's what we're talking about. Now, just let me go back to this. Some students make a mistake with this. When they think polytheism, they'll often think a place with multiple religions. No. That's multi-religious, right? So the United States is a multi-religious country where we have people from all sorts of different religions. Again, polytheism is a single religion where there are multiple gods within that religion. Other topics that come up here: political states and city-states. So political state is any group of people living in defined territorial boundaries and organized under a system of government with officials, leaders, judges. In the United States, we use the term state a little differently here. State is part of our larger country, right? Each of the 50 states is part of the United States. But when we use it in history and in this class, a state is akin to what we would call a country today, right? It's a group of people who have the same leaders, same government, same system. They consider themselves part of a certain political state. A city-state, on the other hand, and we're going to start with these when we get to the first human civilization, a city-state is essentially a city and the surrounding area around it, surrounding countryside, the farmlands, that each one considers itself a separate country, right? And that's what you're talking about by a city-state. It is an independent country, but is based on the city level rather than a large political state like we have today, the United States. Think Russia, China, those are large political states. India, huge areas. A city-state, urban center, exercising political and economic control over surrounding countrysides. These are things like you would have seen in ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Greece, medieval Italy, that sort of thing, right? Think of the Greeks, the Athenians and the Spartans. Those, today we say they're Greeks, because it's one country, but back then, Athens was one country, Sparta was one country. That's the type of thing. Why don't we have this anymore? Imagine if Holyoke, Massachusetts, Chicopee, Springfield, were all independent countries, right? You can see how confusing that would be, how difficult it would be. Why they have city-states for much of the ancient world history? Because it was easier to organize, right? Think about how our modern communication, travel, that sort of thing, logistics, moving things around. It was too difficult to do back then. Until very recently in many ways too. But so that's why you're going to have city-states more in the ancient world. There are still a few city-states left today. Two city-states that still exist in the modern world in 2021. One is Singapore, the city of Singapore, city-state of Singapore, and Vatican City, right, where the Pope lives, in Rome. Well, in Italy, in Rome, is Vatican City. It is an independent nation. It's got its own it's really its own government, everything, its own diplomats, all that. Singapore, same thing. It's a city that is a country as well, and the surrounding countryside. Today we go more towards political states. So other things, Stone Ages. This is something you're going to hear about, right? So the old Stone Ages. So the Stone Ages are broken into two eras. The first one being Paleolithic, meaning the old Stone Age, dating from about 200,000 BCE to 10,000 BCE. So what's BCE? Your textbooks use this term, so we'll use it too. This one, most of them. It means before the current era, before the is really what it means. It used to be BC AD, which would be before Christ. AD meaning Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, which would be the year after Christ is born. Not everybody uses that calendar. And so now what they've been using really since the 1980s is BCE. So your textbook uses it. I'm going to use it too here. So Old Stone Age, that's what the Paleolithic Age. These were mostly human societies as hunter-gatherers. Then what you get is the Neolithic Age, right? Neo meaning new, the new Stone Age, from about 10,000 BCE to 4,000 BCE. This is when humans began to change and began to settle down into permanent settlements, farm, and begin to create civilization. And that's the Neolithic Revolution, right? The invention of agriculture, domestication of animals, and all the changes that occurred. This started in the Near East in in between 10,000 to 8,000 BCE. So we're talking about anywhere to up to 12,000 years ago. And you're going to find it in other places around the world. And we'll look at that later there. But this is really when things began to change. So this is what we mean by Stone Ages. All right, on to more of this. So a lot of this you can see in the textbook. We're going to go through. It's especially about the early hominins, things like that. But here, out of Africa, the theory and debate, right? And so this will also talk about, relate to something I was talking about in the last lecture video. So this is actually where we're going to start lecture video 3 from module 2.